Ukiona ushikilie, unaweza ukanili ya ushikilie ya subiri. Nalilo. Sawa.
All right, so welcome back again. Let us deal with the second part. In the second part, let us consider light as a form of energy. The second part, let us consider light as an energy. So light as an energy, in some extent, or rather in some of the textbooks, they used to explain light as a form of energy. As a form of energy that stimulates sense. So in some textbooks, light is explained as a form of energy that stimulates sense of vision, or in other means is a form of energy that enables us to see, because the sense of vision means it deals with the sight, so it enables us to see. So light is a form of energy. Now, to consider light as a form of energy, let us call back from the topic called work energy and power that you learned when you were Form 1. So the topic is work energy and power. And in work energy and power, you had the subtopic called energy. So you had the subtopic called energy. And in this subtopic, you learned various forms of energy.
Okay, unaweza
So from this subtopic, where we learned various forms of energy, one of the form of energy that we learned there, it is light energy. So we had the light energy. Light energy, I hope everyone remembers this one when you learned the topic called work energy and power. You had the light energy as one of the form of energy. Even though you had various forms of energy like potential energy, you had kinetic energy, you had forms of energy like chemical energy, mechanical energy, electric energy, and various forms. Now, since we are dealing with the light as energy, let us see what differentiates, what distinguishes light energy from other sources of energy or from other forms of energy like chemical energy, like potential energy. What is the difference between light energy? So the question here is, what is the difference between light energy and the other forms of energy? In this question now, we want to see what is the primary difference that exists between light energy and the other forms of energy like chemical energy. What is the difference now between light energy and the other forms of energy? In order to respond correct to this question, first of all, we're going to use various points. So to respond to this question, the first part, let us see now the differences that exist between light energy and the other forms of energy. The primary difference here is, compared to other energy, light transfers energy. So light transfers energy from one point to another. We have got various materials. Some Some of the materials, they tend to reflect light, but others, they tend to refract, and some of the material, they tend to absorb light. So let us consider now for the materials that absorb light. These materials that absorb, the materials that absorbs light, they tend to gain energy. They tend to gain energy. Why do they tend to gain energy? Some materials that absorb light, they tend to gain energy. Why? It's because light is a form of energy. So if they absorb light, that means they absorb energy. So for example, you can consider example solar panels. Solar panels tend to absorb sunlight. They absorb sunlight and they convert this sunlight into electrical energy. So they convert sunlight, which is solar energy, and is transferred and then converted into electrical energy. So every single time you have the material, and when the material absorbs light, it tends to gain energy. Why? It's because light is also a form of energy. So if the material absorbs light, it absorbs also energy. So for example, if you consider solar panels, they tend to absorb sunlight, which is also solar energy, and then the solar energy is converted back into electrical energy, which is used in various activities or in our daily life. So this is a primary difference number one that exists between other forms of energy and the light energy. It is in the point that light transfers energy. This is point number one. Let us head down to point number two. As I said earlier, that light is one of the form of electromagnetic radiation. So it travels in a vacuum. So we have this point that light travel in vacuum. Or rather, light travel in empty space. Why? It's because light is an electromagnetic wave or radiation. And electromagnetic waves or radiation, they do not require material media to propagate. They can even propagate in empty space or rather in vacuum. So light, being one of the electromagnetic waves, it does not require material media to propagate. So we say it propagates in a vacuum or in empty space. This is quite different from sound wave, which requires air in order for it to propagate from one point to another. So this is the second part or the primary difference that exists there. And the third part, though rather the differences that exist, is light travel in a straight line. Light travel in a straight line. So light always, it tends to travel in a straight line. So to show light, let's assume this to be a source of light, and we can draw an arrow to represent a layer of light. We have something what we call a layer of light. What is layer of light? Layer of light is a single line showing the direction of light. A layer of light is just a single line which shows the propagation of light or the direction of light. So this is a layer. We have a layer of light. So in this part, we say light travel in a straight line. So the light has a tendency to travel in a straight line. And this is a difference that also existing between the light energy and the other forms of energy. So this is a third point. Let us see. First point that exists as a difference between light energy and the other forms of energy is light travel with a speed of 3 times 10 power 8 meter per second in vacuum. So, as we said, light can propagate in a vacuum or in empty space. There is a speed of light. There is a speed of light in a vacuum. The speed of light is 3 times 10 exponent 8 meter per second square. And this speed is the highest speed on Earth. The highest speed on Earth. So there is no greater speed than this. So the speed of light in vacuum is the highest speed on Earth as compared to speed of other objects. And this is the first point. And the last one, we say always light originate from the source. Light originate from the source, or rather it come from the source. So light originate from the source. Originate from the source. So light originate from the source. So there is no way out light can be produced without having a source. So there should be a source of light that produces that light. And the source of light now, in order to indicate that light originates from the source, we're going to have an halo, or what we call layers of light. So we have a layer of light. Layer of light. And a layer of light, it consists of an halo. We have this one, this is an halo. What is the implication of this? This implies that at this point, this acts as the source now, and this arrow indicates the direction to where light travels or propagates. So every light, it consists, or rather it originates from the source. So we have got sources of light. So from this point, again, we're going to have another subject, what is called the sources of light. Why? Is because we know for sure that light originates from the source. So there should be a source of light that produces that light. And to indicate that light originates from the source, we're going to represent it by using layers of light. So layers of light consists of this point, which indicates the source, but also it consists of a head, or rather we have an arrow, which indicates the direction. So this arrow shows the direction of light. Direction of light. That means this layer of light, it was produced at one point, but it traveled, and then it shows the direction of this layer. The direction of the layer implies that the light can originate from the source. So from this first point now, we're going to have another subject here, what is called sources of light. So if we know for sure that light originates from the source, now let us see the sources of light, the next part. So the next part is sources of light. So the next part now, the third part of this topic, let us see sources of light. So we have sources of Sources of light, we have got two main types of sources of light. There are two main sources of light. Namely, number one is called natural sources of light. It's called the natural sources of light. And the second one is called artificial. So we have natural sources of light, but also we have artificial sources of light. These are the two main sources of light. Now let us dive into one by one so that we can see what is natural sources of light and again, what is artificial sources of light. Let us start with the first one. The first one is natural sources of light. So natural sources of light. What is natural sources of light? Natural sources of light, these are sources of light. These are sources of light in nature that are not man-made. That are not man-made. Natural sources of light are those sources of light in nature that are not man-made. So these are not made by man. They are naturally. Now, these natural sources of light now, for example, we have the main natural source of light, which is the sun. Example, let us see. Example, we have the sun. Sun is considered to be the main natural sources of light. That means the natural source of light which is not made by man. And also we have stars, but also we have some organisms which produce light naturally, like fireflies. But also we have natural sources of light like volcano lava, which glows. Volcano lava is a natural source of light as well, which glows or produces light when it is hot. So when it is hot, it tends to glow or produce light. When it is hot, it glows or produces light. Fireflies, these are organisms. There are some organisms which are naturally, and they tend to produce heat on their own bodies. We're going to deal with this organism just in a few minutes. But also we have what we call deep sea fish. There are some deep sea fish. They also produce natural sources of light from their own body. So these are examples of natural sources of light. And as you observe in my examples, we have the sun, we have the star, but also we do have a moon. But just in a few minutes, I'm going to explain why the moon is not considered as a natural source of light. Why the moon is excluded as a natural source of light, even though it is also a star. So these are examples of natural sources of light. That means these are not made by men. Rather, they just produce light naturally on their own. So let us head to the second part, which is called the artificial sources of light. Artificial sources of light, in other way, we used to call it as man-made sources These are called the man-made sources. These are sources which are made by man. So these are sources of light that are made by a man. For example, we have matchstick, and also we have candles. So artificial sources of light, sometimes we used to call man-made sources of light. These are sources of light that are made by man. For example, we have matchstick, we have candle, but also we have this one, what is called electric bulb. We have traffic lights. So we have matchstick, we have candles, we have electric bulb, we have got traffic lights, we have headlights, lights found on vehicles. Also, we have oil lamp, and also we have got a lot of sources out there. You can even try to figure out based on your daily life, what are the sources of light that are made by a man. For example, we have also a torch is also a source of light which is man-made. So these are what we call artificial sources of light. As I explained the areas that we have sources of light, and these are the two types of sources of light. First one is natural sources of light, and the second one is artificial sources of light. So these are the sources of. Now, based on all these sources of light, artificial and natural, we got to classify sources of light into two groups. So all these sources of light, natural and artificial, can be categorized into two groups. So we have categories. Categories of sources of light. So all these sources of light can be categorized into two categories. So we have two categories. Number one is what we call luminous source of light. Number two, they are called non-luminous source of light. Non-luminous source of light. Remember, in this category, we are trying to generalize, no matter it is a natural or it is an artificial source, both of them we group into two groups or into two categories. Number one is called the luminous source of light, and the second one is called the non-luminous source of light. Now let us see what is the difference between the luminous source of light and the non-luminous sources of light with examples. Let us start with the first one, what is called the luminous source of light. Luminous sources of light, these are sources of light that produces their own light. Sources of light that produces their own light. So we have this luminous are sources of light in which the object produces its own light. These are sources of light in which the object produces its own light. In other means, the object that produces its own light, since the source is called luminous source, the object, these are sources of light in which the object produces its own light. So in other means is that the object that produces their own light, they are called the luminous objects, but the source is called the luminous source of light. So we have luminous object. In case if you are asked to explain luminous object, these are objects that produces their own source, their own light. For example, what are the examples of objects that produces their own light? So we're going to have, you can even include artificial, even with artificial, but this object should be the object that produces their own light. Number one is sun. The sun produces its own light. So the sun is classified as a luminous object. And also it produces a light which is called the luminous source of light. Why? Is because it produces its own light. It's called luminous object. But also we have this organism called the fireflies. Fireflies also, it produces its own object, but also we have candle. Candle also, we know candle for sure, it produces its own light. So candle is also one of the example, but also we have torch. So torch also produces its own light. So sun, fireflies, this organism, as I said earlier, this organism that produces their own light. But also we have candle. Candle produces its own light. And also we have torch. Torch as well produces its own light. So all these are classified as a luminous object, and the source of light is called the luminous source of light. So this is the first part in this category. Let us see now the second part of this category, what is called the non-luminous source of light. So the second part of this is called the non-luminous sources of light. Non-luminous sources of light, we are dealing with the sources of light in which the object does not produce its own light. So this is a source of light in which the object does not produce its own light. In other way, we can have the object called non-luminous object. Non-luminous object. Non-luminous object, these are objects that do not produce their own light. So non-luminous objects, these are objects that do not produce their own light. So for example, in this case now, we have the moon. So the moon, despite being a star, it does not produce its own light. Even though during the dark, you can go outside and cross-check for the moon, you see like there is a light produced by the moon. It is completely long that the moon produces its own light. The moon is classified as a non-luminous source. Why? It is because it does not produce its own light, rather it reflects light from the sun. So it uses the light from the sun, so it reflects. So it reflects light from the sun. It reflects light from the sun. And hence, you see, it's like the moon produces light, but actually, the real situation that occurs there is the moon does not produce light, rather it reflects light from the sun, and hence, due to reflection, you see like the moon produces light. So the moon is one of the example of the, but also we can have object like table, we have books, and also we can have wall, even human body. All these are examples of non-luminous objects. That means they do not produce their own light. For example, table, it does not produce its own light. It can reflect light, but it cannot produce light. So most of all these non-luminous objects, they have tendency to reflect light from the source. That's why we say they do not produce their own light, even though they can illuminate light, but they cannot produce their own light. Rather, they always reflect light from the source. For example, the moon reflects light from the sun, but also you can have the human body, which can reflect light from another source like torch and whatever. So for example, as you are looking for me here, you see it's like you are seeing a color or some stuff like that, but this is due to reflection of light from the torch. So this is the first part. And the last part of this, let us see this organism, what are called bioluminescence. Let us see the last part of this. Now, let us see this organism which are called bioluminescence. These are organisms that produce. These are organisms that produce So, bioluminescence is considered as a source of light produced by organisms due to chemical reaction from their bodies. This is a source of light. This one is the source of light, which is produced by organism, by living organism, hence the word bio. The word bio means living organism. So, by means simply we are dealing with the source of light produced by organism from their bodies through chemical reaction. So we have got various organisms, and these organisms, they tend to produce sources of light due to the chemical reaction taking place in their body. These organisms are called bioluminescence organisms. So, for example, we have organisms like fireflies. These are birds whose produces light from their body, but also we have deep sea fish. So deep sea fish, they tend to produce light. It's like their body, they tend to glow light. These are examples. So in this first part, at least we have covered the introduction to light, but also properties and the behavior of light. In the next session, we're going to deal with the propagation and the transmission of light. How can light propagate from one media to another? And how can light transmit from one place to another? This will be the next part and the next session. Let us meet in the next lesson.
Bukokwa. Bukokwa. I cannot hear you. Bukokwa. Bukokwa. Hello?
Yes.
Have you understood the teacher?
Yes.
Do you have any questions? No.
Yes.
So I want you
No.
guys to write the questions so then tomorrow when we start our session, I want you guys to ask questions to the teacher. Then we can continue with the lesson by tomorrow. Is it okay?
Yes.
Okay, have a nice day and say hi to everybody out there. Stay safe.
Bye.